You've probably heard the saying that practice makes perfect, and the idea that it takes 10,000 hours to master something. While there's a lot of truth to this, it's not just any amount of practice which leads to mastery, it's a specific type of practice and repetition that can take you to the next level. Let me share my personal journey with you. Back in my late 20s, I decided to learn the Chinese language. Now, Mandarin Chinese isn't known for being the easiest language to pick up. It has hundreds of sounds, 4 tones, and tens of thousands of characters. In fact, it's considered one of the most difficult languages to learn for an English speaker. But that said, I did like the challenge and the language and the culture and all the people I met along the way, which all inspired me to continue studying the language. I started my Chinese studies by joining an evening Chinese class. Nearly all the students in the class were similar to myself, working full-time in their late 20s to 30s and struggling with this really difficult language. Then one day, a student was able to count from 0 to 10 in Chinese without making a single mistake. Now, it sounds quite simple, but it's really challenging for someone new to this language, and I remembered how surprised the whole class was. How did this person, who was just as busy as the rest of us, who seemed to struggle just the previous week, suddenly leapfrogged everyone and spoke so clearly? This gave me motivation. If that person did it, then perhaps I can do it also. So after class, I dedicated time to practicing my tones, pronunciation, and counting, and I kept repeating and correcting myself until I could count to 10 flawlessly. Then I moved on to counting to 100 and then introducing myself in Chinese. My hard work paid off. I showed up to class the following week, and when the teacher asked for a volunteer to count from 0 to 10 in Chinese, I shot up my hand. And I not only did it without making a single mistake, but I also said it really clearly. The class was super amazed at my skill, which boosted my confidence and gave me even more motivation to improve. From there, I spent the next 2 years studying the language for about 3 hours a day. I bought Chinese textbooks, joined social clubs, practiced with language exchange partners, and even found a private tutor to help correct my tones and push me a little bit further. Eventually, I got to a level where I felt comfortable speaking with Chinese native speakers. And I also passed the Chinese language proficiency test, HSK level 5, which is a massive accomplishment on its own. Now, that said, I'm not talented in languages. Many people are much better than me and have reached that level a lot faster than myself. But it does go to show you that you can learn a language in your late 20s and become proficient at it. I've since applied the same principles to pick up Japanese, and now in my 40s, I'm venturing into learning illustration and animation. So, can anyone learn to be good at something, or is it something that you have to be born with? And this is something I wanted to explore a bit further. Daniel Coyle, the author of The Talent Code, looked to answer this exact same question. Where does talent come from? Is it nature or is it nurture? He traveled the world and researched how regular people achieved greatness in music, arts, education, and sports. And he found that talent isn't something you're born with, but something that you can develop with the right approach. He uses neuroscience to explain that all skill comes down to is one thing: myelin, a fatty protein in the brain that enhances the speed and accuracy of nerve impulses. The more myelin you have, the more skilled you are at it. To understand the connection between myelin and skill, let's look at the composition of our brain and how skills are formed. As you learn a new skill or thought, you build new neurons, also known as nerve cells, and axons which connects those nerve cells in your brain. Then, when you do an action, your brain sends electrical and chemical signals through many nerve cells to perform that action or thought. Myelin is a microscopic neural substance that wraps around those neural circuits. It increases the speed and strength of nerve impulses, translating to faster and more accurate actions or thoughts. If you think of neurons as a skill, then myelin is how skilled you are at it. The thicker myelin is, the better you are at that action. The interesting fact about myelin is that it isn't fixed at birth. Anyone can grow it. It forms the most during the early years and declines after about 50. Myelin is indiscriminate about what skills being created. To develop more, you just need to perform that action more. But to encourage the fastest growth, you need to push yourself to learn at the edge by doing what Daniel Coyle terms deep practice. Deep practice involves practicing just outside of your comfort zone, reflecting on any errors and adjusting, and then repeating the process. According to Daniel Coyle, you need to fail and struggle to fire the right circuits to grow myelin. So failing isn't optional, it's actually neurologically required. For effective deep practice, Daniel Coyle breaks it down into 3 rules: chunk it, repeat it, and learn to feel it. Chunk it. Break down what you're learning into smaller actions and focus on one individual part at a time. For example, if you're learning to play soccer, don't just practice complex combinations such as shooting, passing, and ball handling all at the same time. Instead, focus on just shooting first and mastering that skill before moving on to the next one. Repeat it. Repeating an action often triggers a set of neural activities which encourages the growth of myelin. As we learned earlier, this translates to improved action, skills, or thoughts. Practice can be hitting a ball every single day or writing a blog each week. The key to getting results is to practice consistently. And this is because myelin is dynamic. It grows with more practice, but it also decreases with less practice. Learn to feel it. To build myelin effectively, you need to practice at the edge of your ability, the point where it's just beyond your capability, but not too far. Here you can best learn to feel when you are failing and know how to adjust to succeed by trial and error. A great example of deep practice is watching a toddler learn to walk. First, the baby will get up and take a step, then fall. Then the baby will try again and again until one day the baby can walk a few steps without falling. Eventually, the baby learns to walk, but perhaps in a staggering manner. And before long, the baby can walk comfortably and might even start to run. The baby has used deep practice by targeting, failing, and adjusting and repeating. Reflecting on my language studies, I realized that my improvements was due to my learning method, which aligns with deep practice principles. I began with the basics, individual words and their pronunciations. Once I felt comfortable with the foundation, I ventured into expanding my vocabulary and constructing basic sentences. Every day, I would push myself to learn a new word or dive into a slightly more complicated sentence structure, but always ensuring that I was never overwhelming myself. I also intentionally stepped outside of my comfort zone by joining a language exchange meetup to practice in front of native speakers. This wasn't just about more practice, it was about embracing the discomfort of making mistakes in front of others, learning from them, and being open to corrections. These all align with deep practice principles. So I started with learning the foundations, then pushed myself to always improve, embracing failure, and staying consistent in my efforts. Daniel showed that greatness isn't something you're born with, but that anyone can grow to it. However, there are some people who are genetically born with some special trait that gives them an advantage or makes it easier for them to pick up things. For these gifted people, if combined with unwavering motivation, rigorous training, and a strong support, can lead to world-class performers and Olympians. Think of Michael Phelps, who dominated swimming and won 28 medals across 5 Olympics. He had the right drive and strong support, but was also born with large hands, long arms, and a long torso, which made him anatomically ideal for swimming. Now, even if you committed to practicing for 10,000 hours with the right approach and had strong determination, it's highly unlikely that you will ever beat Phelps. However, you can still excel in swimming and outperform the majority of the population. Deep practice reminds us that mastery comes from persistent practice at the edge of our ability and a focus on correcting mistakes. This principle applies to various disciplines, whether it's sports, arts, languages, or anything you're passionate about. So, are you ready to harness the power of deep practice and master your chosen discipline? Let me know in the comments section below, and don't forget to check out the links in the description for more information on this topic. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.